Right, everyone, welcome back. Josh B. Alex Goldman today, joined very luckily again by a guest who this time is not sitting in the freezing cold with a broken radiator, Dan Hardy. Dan, thank you very much for joining us today, man. We really appreciate it. How you going this morning for you?
Yeah, good, good. Always a pleasure talking to you guys. Just trying to catch up on some sleep. The last 3 weeks has been mental with Newcastle,
Mm.
then Mohegan Sun, and then obviously Bellator. But they've been good events, and yeah, three good ones in the bag, and ready to get into the rest of the year.
And that kind of
Mm.
leads into what we first wanted to talk about, which was, I'm curious, what was your reaction to, the Bellator Dublin event, being on call that night and, having Conor McGregor in attendance, which, of course adds a certain gravitas and star power to any MMA event.
Yeah, it was a good event. It was really good. I've been to that arena so many times for different events, and like the UFC going there, Bellator previously, Cage Warriors and stuff, and it's always a special venue. The crowd are always great. The fights always seem to deliver for the fans that, always make sure that they're well heard on the night. And
Mm.
then yeah, as soon as McGregor walks into the building, it just changes the environment entirely. All of the fighters are like, oh, okay, McGregor's here now. Let me see if I can land this
Yeah.
left hand. And all the fans are there. Of course, the kids want to meet him and stuff. And he's very, very gracious with his time. He came in, he walked around the cage. He said hello to, to all the commentary team and the officials and stuff. And then he went and did the cornering, and then he went back around the cage and met as many of the fans as he could. He really took his time and gave everybody some of his attention, which was awesome. And then, Paul Hughes had a great night, as I'm sure we're going to be talking about. And then
Mm.
the lovely interaction between the two of them. Paul
Mm.
thanking McGregor for being the inspiration, and McGregor being there to receive it and to wish him well for the rest of his career.
Absolutely. Dan, first thing I wanted to touch on and pay respects to, I feel like being a part of the media is, I'm not sure if you've seen, I know you've been a busy man, but Casper from Submission Radio is stepping away from Submission Radio, and you have done their show more times than I can remember. It must be at least 400 at this point. But obviously guys that pave the way for guys like us here in Australia. I mean, they're the godfathers of media coverage and that sort of stuff here in Australia. I mean, 10 years they've been at it. I just wanted to give you a chance to sort of react to that and what your thoughts are on those guys after, I know Dennis is going to continue, but the two of them are what makes Submission Radio in my mind. And I guess, well, I wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Submission Radio has grown. I mean, it's gone from strength to strength over the last several years. Always a pleasure talking to those guys. I often see a message pop up and can you talk to us after UFC such and such? And I always try and get online to chat with them. And they do so well promoting the show and getting the clips out and tagging people and the thumbnails. They've just done a fantastic job building themselves a platform and a really strong voice. And they've recruited a lot of new fans to the sport. I'm sure it's a shame that he's stepping away. I'm sure that he's got, good things to be going on to. But at the same time, us older guys at some point after retiring paved the way for
Yeah.
younger generations to come through and take over. Um,
Yeah.
I think submission radio has become a very, very a very strong voice and a very respected outlet in the mixed martial arts space, and it will certainly be missed in the capacity that it is right now.
What's up, guys? It's Josh here from the stands. And look, I know you're in the middle of a good little interview that we're currently doing, but I want to take a second of your time just to give a quick little shout out to today's sponsor, TrainAid. Obviously, they're big supporters of us, like we are of them. And today they're sponsoring this video. And look, I want to let you guys know about a little product they do. Their premium product, TrainAid Hydration. It's the best hydration formula on the market, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. And look, if you don't believe me, ask guys like Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Leon Edwards. You ever heard of these guys? I mean, they're the top athletes in the world. And they're all taking TrainAid Hydration. It really is the number one formula in the world for hydration. And in the summer months here in Australia, I mean, it's something that I think everyone should be taking. And TrainAid have been very nice to give us a discount code, a very healthy discount code as well. I mean, it's a nice little discount code. If you use the code FTS15 at the checkout, they will give you 15% off. We'll leave a link to their website in this description of this video. And yeah, check them out, guys. Please support them because they are supporting us. Cheers.
For
Yeah.
sure. Dan, one saying I've always loved is that, behind every great man, there's a great woman. And I think, your partner Veronica is really proving that, particularly with her win last month, moving to 3-0 since her return, which, I think is really impressive given not just to go 3-0, since her return, but given how fast this game evolves. With only 28 years old, I'm curious, how far do you think she can get in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I mean, honestly, as far as she wants, as far as the opportunities allow us to push, she's very, very talented, and
Mhm.
she always has been. That's the reality. She's traveled around the world and she's trained with so many good people over the years that she's gathered a massive amount of information. So really the job for us in training camp is to make sure that this information is now in a logical order for mixed martial arts. Although mixed martial arts is a massive a massive collection of techniques from loads and loads of different martial arts, traditional martial arts and combat sports. There is an emerging path through mixed martial arts, right? There is an MMA game. And I think certain fighters are really able to find a little kind of a niche within the game that they can exploit and make the most out of. Like Daniel Cormier is an obvious one for me because, of course, he came over from wrestling. He was never particularly a martial artist in the sense of the word, although of course his dedication to his sport was very, very martial in its discipline. um he's never struck me as a martial artist in the way that like a Wonder Boy Thompson would, but DC found his skill set in mixed martial arts and made it work. And he didn't really worry about expanding his game out too much. He added the bits in that he needed to bolster what he could do, but that's really what it's all about right now. I think, finding your path through the sport. And if you can give yourself two or three options, you're going to be even more of a dangerous person. We've mentioned Conor McGregor. He made the majority of his career about landing his left hand in two or three different ways. And then, Paddy Pimblett, someone else's that's, gets a lot of criticism for his skill set. He's making it work because he's got a path to the back, and he's done it all the way through his Cage Warriors career. So really, it's about identifying like the right path, and with her having so much knowledge and information as well as technical and physical skills, really the most important thing for us is to make sure we're walking along that right game plan and not feeling too overwhelmed. And that really was a feeling that I remember having as a young fighter. Like, my goodness, right, I can kickbox, but look at all this jiu-jitsu that I've got to learn. It can be very overwhelming, and that can put you on the back foot before you even step in the cage.
Definitely. We just touched on it earlier, Dan. Obviously, Paul Hughes, big news. Yeah, big news. Paul Hughes. I first heard of Paul from the great P.T. Carroll, and I've sort of followed him ever since. And sort of watched his career evolve and to become one of the hottest prospects, and for the PFL to snap him up was obviously a great play for you guys. Um, I just wanted to get your thoughts on him. Obviously, getting a good win against Bobby King. Had to fight for it as well. Definitely had to fight for it, but he came through in the end. I just wanted to get your thoughts on Paul and how far he can go in this sport. I mean, he's an incredible talent, and one that I think we'll be seeing for many years to come.
Paul's potential is really limitless. It was a big signing for us to get him as a part of the PFL roster, to have him make his Bellator debut and to fight someone like Bobby King, who was, he's had fights on Bellator. You could tell he was clearly the veteran in there, especially when a little bit of excitement may have hit Paul in the first round, and he was putting himself in pockets where he could have definitely been, been punished for. I think, you listen to Paul speak and you see the technical skills that he's got and what he was able to do when he was coming through Cage Warriors. He's clearly a very special fighter, and even, especially when you hear him on the mic, it's unusual to see such a young man that's so grounded and focused and knowing of himself at this point of his career. We see very little emotion come out of him, really. I mean, when he won the Cage Warriors title, we really saw him break down. But the majority of the time, it's almost like he's read the script and he's just, he's just walking he's walking the movie as it's being made around him. That kind of is the vibe that he gives off. And there aren't many fighters that have got that kind of attitude about their career. And Paul Hughes is very much someone that knows where he's going and what he's capable of. And I think, signing with the PFL was more about him making a smart decision as a professional than anything else. We know there was offers on the table from other places, but the offers just weren't very good, unfortunately. And for a fighter like him, he knows how special he is. He knows that he's a hot commodity, and he has to make sure that he's getting financially compensated for what he's capable of. He said something to me a while ago, and he's repeated it in interviews as well. He's like, I'm around UFC fighters all the time, and they're in the gyms holding pads and trying to make ends meet, and I didn't want to be
Yeah.
doing that. And I totally respect that. Like I was in the same situation. You kind of have to hustle because you fight purses don't cover everything. But he's in a position now where he can just dedicate himself entirely to MMA, and that's really where we're going to see the best of his abilities come to the front.
For sure. I'm curious, Dan, I would like to get your reaction to McGregor Chandler kind of falling through. And, I'm more curious that as a fighter and now also as someone that sort of works behind the scenes, how do you view McGregor's decision to postpone that fight?
You know, it's one of those things where it's difficult to judge unless you're the fighter. Like I don't know exactly what his game plan was. What we do know about McGregor is that he's very much about footwork, especially the best versions of McGregor requires him to be mobile, and he's got a long stance, which means that he uses the big toe and the little toe just as much as one another to keep himself mobile. Um, I would imagine that he was trying to work around it. Like we know what Connor's like. He's not going to pull out a fight that he feels like he can win, even if he is injured. I think this shows that he's got a lot of respect for Michael Chandler, and he knows that he needs to be on his A game because I mean he wants to get back on track, right? He wants to be back in the win column. He wants to be back in the conversations of the mixed martial arts world, and he has to get a win in order to do that. So I, I honestly think it's the smart thing to do. Like I remember I rolled my ankle before the Mike Swick fight, and I really considered pulling out the fight because obviously, I needed to be able to move against Mike Swick. But at the same time, I wasn't in a position where I could have demanded another number one contenders fight straight away after. Whereas McGregor's in that position now, and he's been in that position a long time, and he's still taken fights that he didn't need to. At times of his career, like we forget the Nate Diaz. The first one was a short notice matchup. I remember doing a breakdown of that at the side of the Thames because we'd already got inside the octagon, and then the fight was scrapped straight away. So, you can't really say anything negative about him because we know that would take fights on short notice if he felt capable of competing. And I really want the best version of McGregor because ultimately we might be counting on one hand the amount of times we see him fight again. So if he needs both of his little toes in order to be the best, then let's make sure he's healthy.
Agreed. And Dan, on the UFC, obviously they return to your neck of the woods end of next month for UFC 304 in Manchester. Obviously a big card with Leon and Belal, Aspinall and Blaydes. The first one I wanted to touch on was Aspinall, obviously a guy that's would be looking for redemption against Blaydes. Not that he lost the fight due to any other reason bar the injury, but obviously wants to get that win back in his on his record. And obviously with the Jones fight being dangled in front of him, dangled not dangled, wherever we're going with that, it must be frustrating for him. So I'm sure a big display is what he would be looking for in a fight. How do you see this fight being played out between Aspinall and Curtis Blaydes next month?
Um, the thing with Tom Aspinall, the thing with this matchup really is that Tom for me has got two strong skill sets that sit either side of the strongest skill set of Curtis Blaydes. Like of course Curtis Blaydes is a very strong wrestler, and usually within the first 30 seconds of the first round, he's already working a takedown. That does to an extent make him predictable sometimes, and we've seen him punished for that. Like rising attacks can put him away, and we know that Tom's got a very, very diverse striking game. We've seen him use elbow to knee to elbow on the same side before, and that could be really problematic for someone that's a good wrestler because you catch them as they level change into that center pocket, and then as their head comes up, you crack them with an elbow at the same time. Like they're the kind of skills that at the close range, when Curtis is trying to wrestle, Tom's going to be really problematic with. And we've not really seen Tom's ground game too much. Like even if he does get taken down, he's a very strong, physically very strong fighter, but he's been crafting his jiu-jitsu since he was a child under the tutelage of his father. And I know it's not a direct reflection, but what Andy Aspinall was able to do with Savannah Marshall in a few months of training to turn her from a boxer into an MMA fighter was incredible. So you think he's had years and years to craft the skills of his own son. He's going to do that with the utmost focus and attention. And I think that Tom is the result of those years and years of dedicated coaching and tutelage by his father. Like, Tom's going to go a long way. I honestly think right now, if he fought John Jones, he's the guy to beat him. It makes sense why they're doing the Curtis Blaydes fight for two reasons. One, obviously, because the fight makes sense in the rankings, but also two, because if Tom is able to either stuff these takedowns, get back to his feet if he is taken down, or even better, reverse it and submit Curtis Blaydes on the floor straight away, there's a real big conversation around whether John Jones can now handle Tom Aspinall. And I do think that's a question in people's mind right now, especially with Jones running through Cyril Gann the way that he did. But I just don't think we've really seen a fraction of Tom's game yet. I think in the next 10 years, he's going to establish himself as one of the best to ever do it. And I think, you know, him beating Curtis Blaydes and then John Jones is probably the next two steps on his journey.
Definitely. Now, Dan, there were some photos circulating the other day of you in the PFL gloves, and we do have to ask. I know, we got to ask: is there any chance that this could be signaling a return to competition?
Man, you know, it honestly amazes me. I get asked this question still. Look, I'll be honest. Yeah, there's always a chance. If someone comes to me and says, right, this fight's on the table, this guy's pulled out, and we need an opponent for such and such, then if the fight's right, I'll fight. That's who I am. You know, it's the opportunity to fight, the adrenaline rush from walking out, you know, putting the gloves on and getting warmed up again. And I mean, I'm going through it again, obviously with Veronica doing her training camps and that. It's so much easier to be the fighter. There's so much less to worry about when you're when you're doing all the other jobs around the fighting. To be honest, you know, I enjoyed that photo shoot. It was the guys that do the photography for PFL Europe and Bellator. They're incredible. You know, they have this whole plan. They take the fighters through during fight week with the flags, and you know, they do a great job. And we had a bit of downtime, so they asked me if I would go through and do the list of photos. I had a lot of fun doing it. But honestly, putting the gloves on and doing the posing, did get the adrenaline pumping a little bit. I'll be honest. And there's you know. It's just it's one of those feelings. I don't think it ever goes away. You know, we were talking about it yesterday. Veronica and I, we were watching Costa Tzu against Julio Cesar Chavez, and Chavez is one of my favorites. But obviously, he had a rough night against Costa Tzu on that night, and you know, Veronica, she quoted a Marvel movie, and we just kind of flipped it, and I said, look, you know. You either die winning, or you either retire winning, or you fight for long enough to see yourself become the loser. You know, and that's the thing with martial arts. Like, time always catches up with you.
Yeah,
that's why I would prefer some of these veterans to be matched up against other veterans. You know, to make some really interesting old school fights where we can still enjoy these guys without feeding them to the wolves.
So you're saying there's a chance?
My friend, there's always
in the old Jim Carrey. Got some red dye. You got some red dye still in the cabinet?
Always. I've got some,
nice.
got some napalm. The thing is, I don't have to bleach it as much anymore because there's a lot of grey, and the red just takes to the grey much easier now.
Definitely. I wanted to touch on just quickly the 170-pound division in the UFC. Obviously, Leon and Belal are fighting. You know, fight that was the worst kept secret, I think, for a long time. Now that fight is coming to fruition, should Leon get through Belal, which I think a lot of people are expecting? I know Belal maybe is being counted out in this fight. I think he's very credible, but in my opinion, I'm leaning towards Leon as well. What is interesting is I don't know if there's a clear-cut number one contender following the fight with Belal, and I just guess I wondered if you had any thoughts on who may be potentially the next contender at 170. I mean, you got guys like Jack Della, Shavkat, who were potentially going to fight. Jack Della's obviously out with a bit of an injury, a bit of an infection at the moment. So things are all sort of up in limbo. And I guess I just wanted to know your thoughts on the welterweight division.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it does feel like it's wide open, as you mentioned. You know, we've got a lot of newer faces in the division now that have started to come out and clear out the Colby Covingtons and Kamaru Usmans that are, you know, no longer really in the topics of conversations, which is it's good for the division. You know, I think the one thing that everybody's watching right now, of course, is Ian Gary against MVP. You know, there's a lot of eyes on this, and the reality is the rankings don't make that much difference if you've got the attention and you can draw people's eyes to the sport. So, after the press conference and the fieriness and MVP with a big smile on his face, I think this is going to be a really, really interesting fight that's potentially going to shape the rest of the division. You know, we talk about talk about Shavkat, and Ian Gary's talked about either him or Shavkat being the guy, and you know, clearly Ian Gary holds him in very high regard, as we all do as well. But like him, like, you know, Ian Gary and Shavkat are two of the new faces that are most likely going to define this division in a few years. I do still very much feel like the likes of Colby Covington and even MVP. I know he's a new face in the UFC, but he's a veteran face when it comes to the welterweight division overall. I think MVP is going to have a good little sprint at the top as well. It just depends on how he deals with Ian Gary at this point. But you know, I mean, Jack Della Maddalena, some of the best hands in all of mixed martial arts, in my opinion. I think he's got very, very slick boxing. I think he can go a long way. It's, you know, another one, Sean Brady. I still feel like Sean Brady is going to be one of the most difficult fights for any single person in the division.
Yeah.
And just focusing on that top fight as well, you know, it amazes me how people count Belal Muhammad out, especially going into a fight with Leon Edwards. Like, we know how good Leon is, and I fully expect Leon to be able to find his way to victory in this fight. But I don't think it's fair to count out Belal Muhammad. Even if you're a Leon Edwards fan, you can't discount Belal Muhammad and how dangerous and difficult he is. Like, he's got the will and the determination, as well as the skill set to overcome anybody in this division. There's no doubt he's gonna have to fight for it. Like, he's not as quick or as long or as rangy or as snappy or as whatever as some of the other guys in the division, but he has that will to drive into people's range and really force them to work. And people can put Leon on the back foot. You know, he can be outworked. And if I'm Belal Muhammad, I'm thinking, right, I'm just going to be on this guy all the way through. I'm going to make it an absolute scrap, and I'm going to force him to be less technical than he'd like to be. I think this is a really very, very interesting fight. And what I don't want is to discount Belal Muhammad so Leon wouldn't get the credit for beating him like he should, because Belal's an incredibly dangerous person to fight.
Absolutely. Dan, last one from me before we let you go. I wanted to touch on, I think, the biggest star potentially in the PFL at the moment, Dakota Dacheva, obviously picking up a big win over Chelsea Hackett, our own Chelsea Hackett last month, earlier this month rather. I guess she is a phenomenal talent. And in my opinion, I think she's becoming one of the slowly becoming one of the best flyweights in the world, regardless of promotion. And you guys are extremely lucky to have a name like her in your guys' ranks. What are your thoughts on where she stands and you know, a potential tagline of being someone who is, you know, the best in the world regardless of promotion?
I mean, I think she's easily she's easily allowing people to make that argument right now, and she's not fought the people that she needs to prove it. You know, like, Chelsea is a very, very tough competitor, but the momentum on her side compared to Dakota's was not, you know, not the same going into that fight. We saw it in the betting lines. You know, Dakota was a massive favorite, and I'll say this as well. I want to see Chelsea Hackett rebuild herself, because I think she's got a very bright future as well. I just think that she was in a shark tank in this regular season for the PFL. But then if we look at who's made it through to the playoffs, right? You've got Dakota, she's fighting Jenna Bishop. Jenna Bishop's not got a massive amount of experience in MMA, but she's a very, very good grappler. She's a mature fighter. We know what she's capable of, and she's just given a hell of a performance against someone that was massively out experiencing her. And then on the other side, you've got Tyler Santos and Liz Carmouche. Like, if Dakota beats one of those two fighters, then all of a sudden everyone goes like, oh my goodness, now we've got to really pay attention to her. The downside to Jenna Bishop is that she's very dangerous, but she's relatively unknown compared. But people know Santos and Liz Carmouche. So whoever wins out of that bout and progresses through to the final, if Dakota's able to get through Jenna Bishop, which is definitely not a foregone conclusion, that's really where Dakota proves to everybody what she's capable of. Like, I think she's able to beat all of these fighters in this bracket, but I do absolutely feel like the toughest tests of her career are right in front of her. She's got all the skills, clearly. You know, she's tall, rangy, she's fast, she's got a great striking skill set. She lives and trains at ATT, so you know she's working on her ground game, on her anti-clinch with some of the best people around. And she's got the confidence that she knows she can put anybody out if she connects. I feel like she's going to go a long, long way. And you know, she's certainly one that's going to blur the lines when it comes to the pound for pound rankings and the you know, the international rankings, because she can hang with anybody in this weight class.
Absolutely. Dan, it's a privilege and a pleasure, mate, to have you back on. You are one of the best analysts, if not the best analyst in the game. So to get your thoughts on a variety of topics is a real treat for us. Like I said before, we've grown up watching you. So to sit here and chat with you again is it's a pleasure. And yeah, wish you all the best, man, for the next little schedule you've got going on. I know it's a busy one, but you keep killing it. And we'd love to talk to you again in a few months' time.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, we'll absolutely connect again. And anytime you need me, you let me know. And it's always a pleasure coming to talk to you. And
Awesome.
hopefully at some point we'll have a sit down face to face. I need to get back over to that side of the world. And Veronica never visited either, so I need to.
There's a card coming up, so
we've got a few plans coming up. Actually, let me tell you that. I won't say too much right now, but you'll be seeing more of me on that side of the world in the near future. That's for sure.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, guys.